This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, emerging market stocks were dented today by increased uncertainty over a $1.9 trillion US stimulus package. MSCI's index of stocks tumbled 1.7% on the day from a record high. Now, investors are also eyeing surging COVID-19 cases across the globe. On the continent, South Africa's all-share was weaker along with its emerging market peers, also on concerns about potential roadblocks to the huge stimulus package. In Nigeria, performance was tepid, but we did see MTN advancing about 0.5%, certainly helping to nudge the market along today. Now, also coming up on the show. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa called on rich nations to stop hoarding coronavirus vaccines. Public service operations down to a minimum in Zimbabwe. And the demand for camel milk turns fortunes for farmers in Somalia. Now, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has urged wealthy nations to ensure equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines. Ramaphosa said this while speaking at the virtual meeting of the World Economic Forum. Now, Ramaphosa, who is also the African Union chairperson, says that his country, like many others, are struggling to secure sufficient vaccines to start countrywide inoculation programs. Here's Angelo Coppola with more.
Ramaphosa didn't mince his words when it came to accusing richer countries of hoarding up to 4 times the amount of vaccines needed to protect their populations.
But we need those who have hoarded the vaccines to release the vaccines so that other countries can have them, but also to have financial assistance. And in releasing the vaccines, we're not saying them just give them away. We are also saying, in addition to yes doing that, we are saying do make them available so that those countries that do not have access to vaccines right now should have access.
Analysts highlighted the president's position on vaccine nationalism and said it's a repeat of the position the country took around the production of HIV/AIDS antiretrovirals and getting access to the drug licenses to manufacture those drugs locally.
So it's not something new from a South African perspective. What I found quite interesting is that South Africa's taken quite an aggressive stance on this, and it's been joined by countries like India.
There was also a strong emphasis on multilateralism from Ramaphosa.
Obviously, something that South Africa has been involved in last year in its chairmanship of the African Union, also its role on the United Nations Security Council, and the general discourse that COVID is a global problem, but a lot of countries are adopting very unilateral approaches to battling it, imposing their own rules.
Ramaphosa also discussed the Africa Free Trade Area Agreement. He called it revolutionary and the continent's most important initiative ever.
And we actually saw visions of the future with the African medical supplies platform that we set up, because in a way that was like the precursor to the Africa Free Trade Area Agreement, because African countries were brought together on this platform and they started procuring medicines, medical supplies together.
Analysts remain skeptical about the early successes of the Africa Free Trade Area.
The stories that we hear about backlogs at border posts, fresh produce not reaching its intended destinations in time, I think it's going to be very hard to get something viable out of the agreements in the near future.
Ramaphosa's speech is considered moderate by most analysts that were surveyed. However, he was firm on the vaccine and vaccine hoarding and also on the opportunities offered by the African Free Trade Area. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now at Davos, participants are also discussing strategy for bringing the coronavirus pandemic under control. Our reporter Juliet Mann has that report.
It's time to look at the big picture and work collectively. That's the message from day one of Business Bonanza, the Davos agenda. There's a shared determination from world leaders and financial heavyweights to help drive a robust, inclusive, green recovery from the global emergency. That starts with finding common ground on health.
It makes it extremely problematic to adequately address a public health crisis when you're in the middle of a profound degree of divisiveness in the country. When public health issues become politically charged, like wearing a mask or not becomes a political statement, you cannot imagine how destructive that is to any unified public health message.
Charitable organisations say the mega rich have already recovered from pandemic losses, but it could take the poor a decade, which is why vaccinating the world is vital.
It's important for governments and people around the world to shift the mindset to health is an asset that we invest in as opposed to a cost you minimize. And of course, we try to improve equity because typically, especially in case of infections, we're only safe when everybody is safe. And that's why at AstraZeneca, we decided to provide this vaccine to everybody around the world at no profit and as quickly as possible.
The Biden administration's latest moves to rejoin global pacts and organisations have been well received by the Davos community, but major challenges remain. Davos this year cannot be the usual networking fest it's built its reputation on. But this is the first opportunity of 2021 for business leaders to come together to talk about jobs, the green economy, and how to shape future sustainable growth. The forum expects to hold its annual meeting in person in May in Singapore. Juliet Mann, CGTN, London.
And in Zimbabwe, the government has ordered a near shutdown of public service operations in order to minimize the spread of COVID-19, and that's following a spike in infections. Only about 10% of employees shall report to work. The country is on a tight lockdown, which was imposed early January. There are fears that a new, more infectious variant of the virus came to the country when scores of thousands of Zimbabweans living in South Africa returned home for the holiday season. Now, the country of 15 million people has recorded a total of 31,320 cases, including 1,005 deaths. The virus is affecting top leaders of the government, with 4 Zimbabwean cabinet ministers having died of COVID-19 so far, and 3 within the past 2 weeks.
We are facing a lot of challenges here, and we are spending at least 2 hours to several hours waiting just to get assistance. The more we get crowded here without assistance, the more we get infected with this deadly virus.
With the current problem where there's virtual shutdown of the government due to COVID-19, we are now forced to work online from home. And it's unfortunate that there are no proper systems, because with the coming in of COVID, number one thing that was supposed to be done, especially by government, considering that is the largest regulator and also, enabler of critical functions of our society, critical functions of our nation, they were supposed to go online on most services.
And to some corporate headlines now. Lafarge has agreed to offload its 35% shares in Ghana's Continental Blue investment. That's after years of loss-making. The decision follows an emergency meeting of its board of directors. Now, the sale is the second major divestment in less than 2 years after Lafarge Africa's $316 million sale of its South African subsidiary in July 2019. Meanwhile, Hyundai Motors has reported a 57% increase in quarterly profit. That is following strong demand for its high-margin sports utility vehicles and its premium Genesis cars. The company adds that it expects to sell 562,000 vehicles in China and estimates that sales in North America will jump 12% to 909,000 vehicles. Now, Hyundai adds that it will introduce an EV-only platform in early 2021 that will use its own battery technology to cut production time and costs. Meanwhile, British automaker Rolls-Royce has downgraded its expectations for how much its engines will fly this year and warned of a big cash outflow. The company attributes this to the extra travel restrictions aimed at stopping the spread of new COVID-19 variants. Rolls-Royce also says it expects a cash outflow of $2.73 billion. That's compared to the $1.82 billion of outflow predicted by analysts. And AMC Entertainment says that imminent bankruptcy is off the table after the cash-strapped movie theater chain raised an additional $917 million in order to help cushion the blow from the pandemic. Now, the company's shares, which have lost nearly half their value in the last 12 months, surged about 40% in trading before the bell. The company also adds that it has raised capital by issuing new shares while executing commitment letters for more debt. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. Well, we are heading into a short break now, still coming up on the show. Ethiopia close to having a stock market after legislators passed a draft proclamation. And Tanzania in a deal to extract, refine and develop the world's largest battery-grade nickel sulfide deposit.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head out now.
Beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Naidoo.
Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Now, there continues to be a wide misalignment between traditional venture capital models and Africa's market. That is according to a white paper by East African venture advisory firm Kinyungu Ventures. They note that the size of the African market presents a real opportunity for profit, but the environment is not clearly understood. Now, they also say that investors should prioritize practices that reflect the realities of operating in Africa. This includes adopting more focused investment strategies, such as investing in B2B companies or cross-subsidizing a portfolio with less risky, steady return assets and having longer time horizons. Well, let's discuss this further, and we're joined by Tayo Akinyemi. She's the lead researcher at Kinyungu Ventures. Great to have you with us today, Tayo. Now, of course, break down for us this cut and paste strategy that you talk about. You say it does not align with the realities of operating in Africa, especially for VC firms. To what extent has this impacted the success or failure of African startups?
Yes, happy to do so. Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me. So the strategy breaks down to a handful of key assumptions. So one is that you're dealing with very large markets comprised of consumers with a significant amount of purchasing power. You also assume that the ventures you're investing in have the ability to grow exponentially as compared to the amount of investment that you're investing in the venture. This also means that, for example, in a portfolio of 10 companies, the one can basically make up for any losses or just a return of capital in the fund. And then lastly, you assume that there is enough capital to support ventures across their life cycle from the beginning through to growth stage and a potential exit. And so these assumptions are not necessarily true in African markets. And so if you are investing based on those assumptions, you can potentially damage the ventures that you're investing in.
Well, let's talk about the investment strategies that you recommend. You talk about investing in B2B companies, allowing a longer time for returns, using flexible structures such as debt. What is the response, especially from VC firms looking to invest in Africa, when it comes to implementing some of these particular strategies? Are they keen?
Great question. So there's still quite a bit of experimentation in the market in terms of what most makes sense in order to deliver the returns that people are seeking. But what we are seeing is some early experimentation. So if you look at a firm such as a Golden Palm, for example, based in Accra, that is a holding company, and a holding company allows for as long as it's necessary to achieve the investments. And they have quite a robust portfolio, including companies such as M Pharma and Andela that have done quite well, raised a good amount of money, and seem on track to generate significant returns.
Well, we can't forget about COVID-19 because it has impacted several sectors significantly. It has slowed down funding activities on the African continent as well. Now, many investors say they had to adjust their practices due to, especially their due diligence procedures, in order to help to navigate the challenges, of course, posed by the pandemic. So give us a sense of how much COVID-19 may have changed investment strategies, and will these changes create new and lasting trends going forward?
Great question. So, I mean, there's a way in which the impact of COVID-19 is still yet to be completely realized. But it's really interesting to note that the amount of money raised in 2020 was actually on par with the amount of money raised in 2019, ranging from 700 million to over $1 billion. So investments are still being made. But as you rightly outlined, the way that investors are doing due diligence has changed. What's also changed is the degree to which investors are seeking out new investments. So a lot of the money that was deployed was in deals that were probably also in progress. I think COVID-19 will also affect the level of technological adoption on the continent, which will enable more businesses that might have been possible due to a lack of interest or level of comfort with technological solutions. And then as well, in addition to the expedited adoption of technology, there's a renewed interest in other areas such as health tech and ed tech, which are enhanced by the conditions caused by COVID-19.
Now, before you leave us, you say that this more focused strategy has been proven on the continent. Point us to some of those startup successes that you have seen on the continent adopting the strategy you speak of.
So I'll mention two very briefly. So one of the things we talk about in the report, as you have already mentioned, is this idea of investing in B2B businesses. So you may be familiar with Paystack, which is a Nigerian startup that was acquired by Stripe, which is based in the US for more than $200 million. Stripe essentially enables businesses to get paid. And Stripe does the same thing on a global level. So Stripe is building its businesses based on serving other businesses. Another notable example is an AI-driven startup that serves agricultural, climate, and other markets. And the idea there with Grow Intelligence is that they are providing market intelligence to these sectors, presumably consisting of other businesses as well.
Well, thank you for those examples, and thank you for joining us on the show today. Of course, that was Tayo Akinyemi. She's a lead researcher at Kinyongo Ventures. Well, let's now turn our attention to Ethiopia. The country has passed a draft proclamation which approves the formation of its first capital market. The government hopes the market, that will be mainly private sector led, will support the development of the national economy by mobilizing capital. It is part of the financial sector reforms that Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government has been pushing since 2018 in an attempt to improve the country's economy. Here's CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi reporting from Addis Ababa.
When up and running, Ethiopia's stock exchange market expects the private sector will hold around 75% of the shares.
In the near term, banks are likely to qualify quickly for listing because their accounting standard is already up to standard, international standards, and also multinationals are also likely to be, easily ready to issue securities in the near term. And then I think, on the demand side, of course, the main institutional investors, the source of liquidity are likely to be pension funds, both the public and private pension funds. They have enough, liquidity to support the market. Right. And also the insurance, companies, they will also be one of the main source of liquidity. And hopefully the collective investment, schemes or asset managers will be able to mobilize finance from the public.
The country has taken best practice from countries like neighboring Kenya, whose Nairobi Stock Exchange is over 60 years old.
If we would have to, leapfrog in this area, we really need, foreign capital. We need know-how. We need technology. So we are hoping that this sort of PPP type initiative will be successful.
The government says the formation of a capital markets authority will be first priority. This, investment experts say, is vital for building investor confidence in the stock exchange.
Today we're in a regulatory vacuum when it comes to stock trading. I mean, take the banks or the insurance companies. They have hundreds of thousands of shareholders. It's like a giant private placement that we're discussing. And trading is essentially between individuals or somebody's facilitating it. There's no price discovery. It's not the way we should operate, especially when these institutions are very large.
According to the International Finance Corporation, 1 in 5 countries in Africa does not raise enough revenue to meet its basic needs, and domestic capital markets represent an opportunity to reduce development gaps. The government here hopes that through well-established and regulated capital markets, companies will be able to raise funds by selling shares, stocks and bills to finance promising investments, and citizens will get alternative saving mechanisms. For this to be fully realized, some experts say that Ethiopia must hasten reform of other financial institutions like banking and the foreign exchange system. Coletta Wanjohi, CGTN, in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
And the International Monetary Fund has urged Tunisian authorities to focus more on promoting growth and curbing poverty while reducing government spending. The North African nation is grappling with a wave of protest over a deteriorating economy that has been made worse by the coronavirus pandemic. From Tunis, here is Adnan Shaushi with more.
The International Monetary Fund noted during its latest mission that the fiscal deficit of the North African state is estimated to have widened to 11.5% of GDP, notably because of lower revenue, a higher wage bill, and additional transfers to state-owned enterprises.
Tunisia is experiencing the worst economic crisis in its modern history, and since independence, the economy has shrunk and investments are absent. The country needs urgent reforms and fiscal policies aimed at mobilizing revenue, containing current spending, and reducing the public sector wage bill. If adopted, these plans will reduce Tunisia's budget deficit while maintaining public investment.
Tunisia's GDP growth is expected to rebound to 3.8% in 2021 as the effects of the pandemic start to wane, the IMF said. However, experts maintain that the economic effects of the COVID-19 crisis could last for several years.
The repercussions of the pandemic will remain for many years, even if the pandemic starts to wane in 2021. The government is prioritizing spending on health and social protection. Economic growth will not rebound if the health situation does not improve.
Following an online meeting with IMF officials, Prime Minister Hisham Meshishi said the government is preparing to launch structural economic and social reforms this year. However, the North African country is currently facing large-scale protests that have been exacerbated by the deplorable social situation in some regions.
أتفهم المطالب الاجتماعية والاقتصادية وأعتبر أن دوري الأساسي.
I fully understand the social and economic demands. I consider my central role as Prime Minister is to listen to the public call for reforms and to realize the objectives of economic growth. The obsession with development is the main project of this government. We will do our utmost to improve the economic and social situation nationwide.
The Ministry of Finance and Economy declared that the government plans to revise the compensation system in 2021. Tunisian authorities will also seek to contain the public wage bill and restructure public companies. According to the Prime Minister's cabinet, the government and IMF staff agree that Tunisia currently faces the dual challenge of saving lives and livelihoods until the pandemic wanes. IMF experts have urged Tunisia to adopt a credible and well-communicated reform plan. Abden Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And heading to Tanzania now, the country has signed a contract to extract, refine and develop the world's largest battery-grade nickel sulfide deposit. Now, the deal is a partnership between the government and a company called LZ Nickel to form a joint venture company known as Tembo Nickel Corporation. Here's CGTN's Daniel Kijo with the details.
Tembo, which means elephant in Swahili, symbolizes the largest animal on land. A fitting name for Tembo Nickel Corporation, the company formed under signing one of the most important deals in Tanzania's mining history. President John Magufuli's government started to reform the mining sector 4 years ago. British company LZ Nickel has now partnered with the Tanzanian government to mine the biggest nickel deposit in the world.
In 2017, through amendments to mineral laws, both number 5 and 6 pieces of legislation emphasised that all minerals are the property of the Tanzanian people, and minerals are profitable. This is why I've always said that Tanzania is a rich country.
Kabanga Nickel Mine is a nickel sulfate deposit located in Kagera region, northwest of Tanzania. It's estimated to contain more than 1.52 million tons of nickel. Due to its heat resistance and tough attributes, nickel is used in building and infrastructure, chemical production, energy supply, and other spheres. This deal takes British investment in Tanzania up to $5 billion, surpassed only by China, which has invested slightly more than $7 billion. The British High Commissioner to Tanzania says the mine will provide badly needed raw materials for the 21st century.
As iron powered the first wave of the Industrial Revolution at the end of the 18th century, so it is metals like nickel and cobalt that are proving so vital to the technologies of the 21st century.
Tembo Nickel Corporation will mine, process and refine nickel, cobalt and copper co-byproducts. The government revealed that economic benefits from the Tembo Nickel project, formerly known as Barrick Gold and Glencore, will be shared equally between the two shareholders. The hydro-refinery technology that will be used is expected to reduce the mine's carbon footprint and minimize environmental impact, as well as lower production costs. With the ability to refine multiple metals, the project aims to develop the country's vision to make Tanzania a mineral processing hub for East and Central Africa. Tanzania is the fourth largest gold producer in Africa. It also has a variety of rare earth minerals like titanium and palladium. The vice chairman of LZ Nickel said the company is investing in Tanzania for mutual benefit.
We are here to do business with you for the long term and to help you develop further your wonderful country for the benefit and upliftment of all its people.
The Kabanga Nickel project needs no further exploration for its development. With the government negotiation team and the UK firm in agreement on the important aspects of the project, they say what follows now is a smooth rollout. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
You are watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a quick break now, but still coming up. The International Monetary Fund has raised its forecast for global economic growth in 2021. And the United States is welcomed back to the Paris Climate Agreement.
Taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 48 hours, no break.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
And a look at other headlines at this hour. Botswana is expecting widespread rainfall in the coming days as a result of Cyclone Eloise that has so far devastated Mozambique. Now, heavy rains and flooding have also been experienced in South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Eswatini. 3 people have been reported dead in Eswatini, while 6 people lost their lives in Mozambique. And the death of a protester in Tunisia sparked further clashes on Tuesday as lawmakers prepare to vote on a new government. Haikel Rashdi died on Monday after suffering injuries in clashes this month. The anti-government protests began in mid-January with youth complaining over unemployment and poverty. And the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization says about 40 million Nigerians could face an acute food shortage this year. farmers have been impacted by COVID-19 and insecurity. Experts say prompt and pragmatic measures need to be taken in order to avert a crisis. And South Sudan's government says it has ordered 5 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines. The country's health ministry says the Gavi Vaccine Alliance will supply those doses. However, it will still be several months before the first vaccinations are carried out. And that's a recap of today's other headlines. And let's turn our attention to the international front. The International Monetary Fund has raised its forecast for global economic growth in 2021. It predicts global growth of 5.5% this year, citing expectations of a vaccine-powered uptick later in the year, and added that policy support in the United States. As well as countries like Japan and a few other large economies. In its latest World Economic Outlook, the fund forecast a 2020 global contraction of 3.5%. This is an improvement of 0.9 percentage points from the 4.4% slump it predicted in October, of course reflecting stronger than expected momentum in the second half of 2020.
Now, there is a great deal of uncertainty around this forecast. If you could have greater success on vaccinations, especially vaccine rollouts. If there is additional policy support provided, outcomes could improve. But on the other hand, if there is going to be a slowdown in vaccine rollouts, and if there's a premature withdrawal of policy support alongside a mutating virus, then that could certainly lead to worse outcomes. Projected growth that we see for this year follows a severe contraction in 2020. Now, even though the estimated collapse for 2020 is somewhat less dire than we had projected in October, the crisis in 2020 still remains the worst peacetime global contraction since the Great Depression.
Meanwhile, former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has welcomed the United States back to the Paris Climate Agreement. This was at an online adaptation summit attended virtually by world leaders on Monday. Now, Washington's new special climate envoy, John Kerry, attended the summit. U.S. President Joe Biden is this week expected to release more policies to tackle climate change after his predecessor, Donald Trump, quit, saying it was too costly to the U.S. economy. Now, leaders at Monday's event stressed the importance of having Washington back at the table. Climate change could depress global food production by up to 30%, while rising seas and greater storms could force hundreds of millions of people in coastal cities out of their homes.
When I reflect on how we have responded to the global pandemic and what lessons we might have learned these past years, one quality shines through. That is the power of global partnership and collaboration. That's the most important things. In this regard, I'd like to take this opportunity to highly commend the visionary leadership of President Joe Biden of the United States for his decisive action to rejoin the Paris Climate Change Agreement as the first act of his presidency. This means the multilateralism which has been in disarray during the last 4 years is now back.
And heading to India now, the country is aiming to produce 450 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2030. Prime Minister Narendra Modi made this declaration at the Climate Adaptation Summit. The online event was hosted by the Netherlands and aims to set out practical solutions for dealing with climate change in the period until 2030.
We have promised ourselves that we will not just meet our Paris Agreement targets, but exceed them. We will not just arrest environmental degradation, but reverse it. And we will not just create new capacities, but make them an agent for global good. We are targeting 450 gigawatt of renewable energy capacity by 2030. We are promoting LED lights and saving 38 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions annually. We are going to restore 26 million hectares of degraded land by 2030.
Meanwhile, the UK is aiming to go carbon neutral by 2050. As Kitty Logan finds out, it's banking on clean energy, including offshore wind farms.
It's the future of energy generation. Hornsea 1 is currently the world's biggest offshore wind farm. Giant wind turbines planted in the sea off the northeast coast of England. And next to this will soon be Hornsea 2, even bigger.
It's a completely green energy source, so with no costs to generate. It's 1.4 gigawatts of power. Now, that's enough for 1.3 million homes.
The British offshore wind power industry has taken off in recent years. Shallow waters and high winds create ideal conditions for an energy source helping combat climate change.
You essentially take wind, which has absolutely zero carbon, you turn that into electricity, capturing it in the sea, and then return it to land in a very environmentally friendly way.
UK government subsidies are attracting investment in the sector too.
I think long-term, stable, clear policy has really helped for certainty for investors and also helped to bring those prices down. And that's allowed wind to sort of start taking the share that coal and natural gas were producing.
The government set an ambitious target to power all homes from wind by 2030. The National Grid says last year was already the greenest yet for the country's electricity system, with lowest ever levels of carbon emissions and record highs of wind power. Around 1,500 onshore wind farms also play a vital part.
Onshore wind farms are generally much cheaper and easier to establish, though far smaller. But even a few wind turbines like these can power several thousand local homes.
The ultimate aim is to replace dirty fossil fuels like gas to reach net zero emissions by 2050. That means changes in homes and to national infrastructure.
With wind and with more renewables, we'll need to see more storage, like battery storage. We'll need to see more flexibility allowed by the system. But once all of those things in place, I can't see any reason why renewables and wind in particular wouldn't just grow and grow.
Wind power is now cheaper to produce, creating lower bills for consumers. There's greater acceptance too of turbines on farmland, though conservationists warn of risks for birds and want turbines kept away from migrating flocks. But there is plenty of public support for projects like Hornsea 2, which boost local economies. And as construction of this huge wind farm moves ahead, the government's wind power goals are getting closer. Kitty Logan, CGTN.
Now, thousands of Indian farmers protesting against agricultural reforms breached barricades to enter the historic Red Fort complex in the capital Delhi on Tuesday. They clashed with police who fired tear gas to scatter them. One farmer was killed when his tractor overturned in the chaos. The angry crowd swarmed to the city centre where the government was holding an annual Republic Day parade of troops and military.
After barging through barricades in the capital's main arteries, convoys of farmers and tractors sped wildly around city roads, forcing police and bystanders to leap for safety. Their demands were loud and clear.
This protest is against the 3 farm laws and laws on minimum support prices, and this parade demonstrates our anger as farmers who are falsely called Pakistani and Khalistani. We believe in our Indian tricolor flag. The flag is our honor and pride. The government should talk to the farmers.
Police said the situation was getting out of control.
Many people followed the designated route for the tractor rally, but there were many other protesters who hurled stones at police, vandalized the police barricades, and tried to run over our people. Some of our policemen were also injured. Such things should not happen in peaceful protests.
About half of India's 1.3 billion people work in agriculture. Unrest among an estimated 150 million landowning farmers worries the government. Farmers are angered by laws they say will help large private buyers at the expense of producers. They have camped outside New Delhi for almost 2 months, posing one of the biggest challenges to Prime Minister Narendra Modi since he came to power in 2014. 9 rounds of talks with farmers' unions have failed to end the protests. A union leader said protesters were planning a march on foot towards the National Parliament on February 1st, the same day the government releases its annual budget. The government says the new regulations enable farmers to sell produce on the open market instead of only through state-run bodies that guarantee a minimum price. Farmers say that leaves them at the mercy of big corporations, and they insist that the government must repeal the laws.
And moving on now, the number of cryptocurrency users around the world continues to explode, as do the volatile prices. Now, though its value has recently dropped, Bitcoin has about tripled over the past year. And as CGTN's Mark New now reports, digital assets are now finding their way into new markets.
From gas stations to supermarkets to garages, cryptocurrency machines are likely coming to a location near you. The company CoinCloud just installed its 1,400th kiosk that lets people from all walks of life buy and sell digital currencies like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and US dollar stablecoins.
Women over the age of 45, they are our #1 customer. That's what that demographic really appreciates, is the tangibility of the physical kiosk and the instant accessibility.
And this CoinCloud kiosk is located in a convenience store and a gas station here in Silicon Valley. You don't have to open up any type of brokerage account. All you have to do is follow a few instructions, scan my code, insert my money, and I bought Bitcoin within minutes.
So the big prediction for 2021 is that digital currency wallets are going to become native to any financial mobile app. So whether it's PayPal, the Facebook Libra project, the Cash App, it's inevitable. And the open nature of cryptocurrencies and the ability to send money anywhere in the world, not limited to banks.
No limitations mean cryptocurrencies are finding their way into new markets like digital art. Artist Jeff Emanuel founded the Pastel Network, which created its own cryptocurrency powered by blockchain technology. The network allows artists to securely sell their network to collectors, bypassing the gatekeepers of the industry, like dealers, agents, and galleries.
Any artist can create an original digital artwork, register it on the system, say how many copies of it exist, and sell it, list it for sale in Pastel coins. And then people, collectors, fans of the artist can purchase these rare copies and then hold on to them, and hopefully they'll appreciate and value, or they can turn around and resell them.
Other markets being transformed by blockchain technology include the world of sport. Socios.com has just partnered with football team AC Milan to launch the AC Milan token, a crypto asset for fans.
What you buy is a share of influence, and that's actually where the blockchain technology becomes interesting, because you get a piece of the rights to vote on some basic decision for the clubs that are related to the music in the stadium, the color in the jersey, and everything that is fan related.
Prices for the tokens fluctuate depending on the market. Socios.com has already launched crypto assets for football clubs like FC Barcelona, Paris Saint-Germain, and Juventus. It's also working on a similar project with mixed martial arts organization UFC.
Before COVID, these guys used to make millions of dollars of people going in a stadium, and suddenly they don't come anymore. And these people in the stadium, they represent less than 1% of their fan base, but they were representing a significant amount of revenue. Now that this revenue is zero, they start to focus on the 99% of the people that were not coming to the stadium.
Socios.com says in 2020, their digital tokens generated $30 million, most of which went directly to the sport teams. Mark New, CGTN, San Francisco.
Now imagine scaling the Great Wall of China or floating down the Amazon River in the comfort of your own bed. Virtual tourism may be the safest and latest way to travel in light of the pandemic. In Colombia, one company is taking the lead, and here's CGTN's Michelle Beguet with more from Bogota.
Colombia's tourism industry was breaking records in 2019. That all came crashing down in 2020 with the pandemic. One Colombian tourism company decided to take their exotic destinations into the living rooms around the world. The company started compiling its audio-visual content to create virtual tours.
Many of our guides had personal audiovisual material, and we had never explored this. For example, images of the almost 2,000 varieties of bird species in Colombia.
What they found was a new business opportunity. The company called Outlanders began offering personalized tours with local guides who share their knowledge and answer questions. The audiovisual material gives virtual travelers a first-hand look at some of the country's most remote regions. Finding new ways to do tourism is vital for this sector, which has taken a huge hit with the pandemic. According to the United Nations World Tourism Organization, international arrivals tumbled last year 81% in July and 79% in August, typically the two peak travel months in the Northern Hemisphere.
In Colombia, there was a lot of growth, 5 or 6% annual growth in tourism, which was higher than the international average growth, and so there is a high expectation and investment in the tourism infrastructure.
Outlanders founder says that while tourism is down, they have hosted more than 2,000 virtual tourists. Some even flew to these tourism spots once flights in Colombia reopened. But this company says they are planning to continue this new venture as it connects with clientele they had never been able to reach before.
The interesting part is that many people have been able to see parts of the country that they would never have been able to travel to because of time or medical constraints, or even age, when they can't go to these challenging nature tours.
This nature tour is taking a page from nature, adapting and evolving for survival. Michelle Bege, CGTN, Bogota, Colombia.
Well, let's now shift focus and take a look at commodity markets today. Oil prices were stable as some bullish signals that there will be better compliance with the supply cut deal was countered by concerns that a U.S. stimulus package might hit some snags. Also, rising coronavirus cases is still raising those concerns that demand might be hit. Meanwhile, gold prices firming up today as U.S. Treasury yields ease. The precious metals appeal as an inflation hedge was also boosted by expectations that a large U.S. stimulus will suddenly be passed eventually. Well, let's take a short break now, still to come. The demand for camel milk turns fortunes for farmers in Somalia.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
And heading to Somalia now, where demand for camel milk is on the rise in urban centers. Population growth due to increasing stability is driving that demand. Well, CGTN's Abdulaziz Bello reports from the Lower Shabelle region on Somalia's love for camels.
On the outskirts of Kismayo, Hassan Abdi is milking his camels. It's part of his daily routine before taking the camels out to graze. His wife Nima Ahmed also takes part in the milking process.
I have several camels here, even those with young ones. If their milk production reduces, I return them to the rural areas and bring new ones that can produce plenty of milk for sale and for our own consumption.
Demand for milk is high in Kismayo, the regional capital of Jubaland, as well as in most towns all across Somalia. It's for this reason that nomads are moving with their camels nearer the city, with hopes of making good sales.
We moved here with our camels 7 years ago. People travel all the way from Kismayo to drink camel milk. We milk the camels in intervals, and we make a good amount of money in return.
Meanwhile, a group of young men have come to spend the weekend with the nomads. Amin Abdi prefers drinking his camel milk as fresh as possible.
There is a big difference when you drink milk from the rural areas as compared to when it's brought to the city. It tastes much better and when it's warm and straight from the camel.
In the capital, Mogadishu, 1 liter of camel milk goes for around $2. In restaurants, it is consumed raw or used to make tea. Several companies have set up camel farms near the city. Camels at this farm are milked at least 3 times to 4 times a day. And if fed well, a single camel can produce 10 to 15 liters of milk. Amazing.
Camel milk has high calcium percentage compared to other milk. It strengthens bones for children and the elderly. People don't just drink it for no reason.
Somalia is among countries with the highest number of camels in the world. The Horn of African nation exports the livestock to Gulf countries. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization says the industry contributes to about 40% of GDP, and roughly over 65% of the population engages in some way in the thriving industry. However, climate-related disasters remain the biggest threat to the livestock sector. Abdulaziz Bello, CGTN, in the Lower Shabelle region, southern Somalia.
And before we leave you today, a quick look at Africa's currencies. South Africa's rand weakening about 0.6%. It did extend losses to a 4th straight session, as we saw tepid risk appetite exacerbated by concerns over South Africa's fiscal health. Also, new variants of the coronavirus discovered in the country is causing investors some concern. Meanwhile, Nigeria's naira continues to fall at the official importer-exporter window as dollar supply continues to decline in the country. It depreciated to 394 naira per dollar, of course, at the NAFEX window. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me,